She had packed the bag at 4 in the morning, which was when the house was the quietest and when the decision that had been building for 3 weeks had finally become the kind of decision that required action rather than continued accommodation. The decision was this. She had been in the Crail household for 7 months, which was 3 months longer than she had planned to be there. And in the 7 months, something had developed that she had not come to the Crail household to develop, and the something was not going to resolve itself by waiting, and waiting was therefore not the correct response, and departure was. She had packed the bag with the efficiency of a woman who had packed bags before, which was quickly and in the order that made everything accessible. And she had set it beside the door, and she had lain back down on the bed to wait for a reasonable hour to take her leave, and she had not expected to fall asleep again. And she had. Her name was Delia Voss, and she was 31, and she had been a household tutor for 8 years, which was a specific kind of household position that required her to be in the household in a fuller sense than a teacher in a schoolroom was in a school. Because tutoring in the household meant she was present at breakfast and at dinner and in the evenings when the lessons extended into the natural conversation of the day, and the fullness of that presence produced a fullness of knowledge that a schoolroom arrangement did not produce, and the fullness of knowledge sometimes produced other things she had not intended. The 8 years had given her a knowledge of households she had not expected when she started. She had expected to learn teaching. And she had learned teaching. But the household knowledge accumulated alongside the teaching knowledge and was different from it. It was the knowledge of how families worked and where the gaps were and what the children needed that was not in any curriculum, and the gaps were usually the same gaps, which were the gaps that a household produced when it was running well in the practical sense and not quite right in the other sense. And the other sense was her professional province to address as much as the academic sense. Because a tutor who taught only in the academic register was a tutor who understood half of what was happening in the household. She had been careful, in 8 years, not to develop the other thing, which was the specific attachment that sometimes developed between a household tutor and the family she was tutoring, and she had been careful because she had seen what happened when the attachment developed and was not reciprocated, which was a departure under conditions that were worse than the conditions of a planned departure, and she had planned all her departures, and all of them had been correct, and all of them had been on time. This one had not been on time. She had planned to leave in February, and she was still here in May, and the February to May interval was the interval in which the attachment had developed, and the attachment was specific and named in her own accounting, and she was not going to name it more than once here, which was that she had come to care for the man of the household in a way that was not the way a household tutor cared for the man of the household, and the caring was clear to her after 3 weeks of being clear to her, and she had not found any evidence that the caring was returned, and she was a practical woman who understood that unreturned caring had a limited shelf life, and the shelf life on this one had expired. The something that had developed was specific, and she had been managing it for 3 weeks by the same method she used to manage all things she could not immediately resolve, which was to continue doing the work correctly while the management was ongoing. And the continuing to do the work correctly had worked for 3 weeks and had stopped working at approximately 3 in the morning on this particular Tuesday, when she had lain awake for the 3rd consecutive night and had understood that 3 weeks of management had not changed the situation and was not going to change the situation. And the bag was packed. The bag was packed, and she was leaving, which was the correct response to an unresolved situation that could not be resolved by waiting, and she had set it beside the door and had lain back down to wait for a reasonable hour, and she had not expected to sleep again. And she had slept. His name was Orrin Crail, and he was 40, and he had been running the North Callaway spread for 12 years, and had been raising 2 children in the household for the 7 years since his wife had died. And the 2 children were Nell, who was 10, and Seb, who was 8, and both of them had been Delia's pupils for 7 months, and were the reason she had stayed 3 months longer than she had planned. She had planned to stay 4 months when she arrived. The arrangement was for the winter, which was the season during which a household tutor was most practically deployed, and she had arrived in October and had planned to leave in February. February had come, and she had not left because Nell was in the middle of a progression in her mathematics that Delia had not wanted to interrupt. Nell had a specific relationship with numbers that was unusual and required careful tending because it could become something excellent or could become anxiety, and the difference between the two outcomes was the quality of the teaching at the moment the progression was happening. And Delia had not been willing to hand that moment to a successor who would have to start from the beginning. March had come, and she had not left, because Seb had developed a love of reading that was producing results she had not wanted to abandon. Seb had been a reluctant reader in October and was a committed one by March. And the commitment was fragile in the way of new commitments, and she had not been willing to interrupt the fragility with a transition. April had come, and the something that had developed had begun to be clear to her. And she had started packing in her head in April and had not packed in fact until this morning at 4. She woke at 7 to the sound of the house beginning its day, which was the sound of the kitchen starting and the specific footfall of 8-year-old Seb going from his room to the kitchen with the particular quality of urgency that characterized his mornings. She lay still for a moment. She had that quality of pre-waking awareness in which a person knows something before they have fully assembled the knowing, and what she knew before she had fully assembled it was that the bag was not where she had put it. She sat up. She looked at the door. The bag was not beside the door. She got up and she looked in the closet, and the bag was there, unpacked, and her things were in the closet in the positions she had put them in at the beginning of October, which was to say the positions of a person who had been intending to stay, and the putting back had been done carefully, which meant it had not been done in a hurry, which meant it had been done with intention and with the specific quality of care that Nell brought to things she did carefully. She stood at the closet for a long moment. She went to the kitchen. Nell was at the kitchen table with her mathematics. Seb was at the stove with what was becoming breakfast, which was a project he had been developing for 3 months with the methodical seriousness he brought to everything he decided to do, and it was reaching the level of something close to edible. Neither of them looked up when she came in, which was the specific quality of not looking up that children produced when they were managing the knowledge that something significant had happened and had decided that the managing was best done by appearing to be occupied with something else. She said good morning. Nell said good morning without looking up from the mathematics. Seb said good morning and turned the pan without looking up. She said she wanted to ask them something. Nell said she was listening. Seb turned the pan again to show he was also listening. She said had either of them been in her room. There was a pause of approximately 2 seconds, which was the length of a pause in which 2 children silently negotiated who was going to answer, and the negotiation was audible in the quality of the pause, and the outcome was Nell. Nell said yes. She said when. Nell said early. She said the sun was just coming up and she had heard Delia's door, and she had looked, and the bag was there, and she had understood what the bag meant, and she had gotten Seb, and they had unpacked it and put everything back. She said why. There was another pause. Nell said because the bag being packed meant she was leaving, and they did not want her to leave. She said it simply, in the way of a 10-year-old who had decided that the simple version was the accurate one, and the accurate one was what the situation required. Seb said from the stove, without turning around, that they had put everything back exactly right. He said he had checked. She said she knew they had. She said she could tell. She said she was going to need to speak with their father. Nell said he was in the study. She said it in the way of a person who had known where their father was going to be and had expected this conversation to happen, which was the way of a 10-year-old who had thought through the sequence of events further than adults sometimes gave 10-year-olds credit for. She said thank you. Seb turned from the stove and said the eggs were going to be ready in 5 minutes and she should stay for breakfast. He said this without looking at her, which was the way Seb said things that mattered to him, which was looking at the thing he was doing rather than the person he was saying the thing to. She said she would stay for breakfast. She meant it when she said it, which was different from the last 3 times she had stayed for breakfast, which she had meant in the ordinary sense of meaning, and had not meant in the specific sense of meaning that she meant it now. This is Dusty Vows, where the children knew before either of the adults could say it. And they said it in the only language children have, which is the action. If you want the next story the moment it lands, subscribe now. Then, back to the house. She went to the study. He was at the desk with the quarterly accounts, and he looked up when she came in, and his expression had the quality of a person who had been expecting her, which she noted and set aside for the moment. She said she needed to tell him something. He said he was listening. She said she had packed her bag at 4 this morning. He was quiet. She said she was telling him because he was going to find out and she would rather tell him than have him find out from the children, and also because she owed him the explanation. He said he would like the explanation. She said the explanation was that she had been in the household for 7 months and something had developed that she had not come to the household to develop, and the something was on her side, and she had not found any evidence that it was on his, and the practical response to one-sided development of that kind was departure before the one-sidedness became untenable. And she had determined that the departure should be now. He was quiet for a moment. He was quiet in the way of a person who was deciding how to say the thing they had been preparing to say, which was different from the quiet of a person who did not know what to say. He said she had been going to leave without telling him. She said she had been going to tell him at a reasonable hour. Yes, he said he meant without telling him the reason. She said she had been going to say the tutoring arrangement had run its course, which was a standard way of ending a household tutoring position that she had used before and that was specific enough to be satisfying and general enough not to require elaboration. He said that was not the reason she had given him. She said no. She said she had not intended to give him this reason. He said he had a question. She said she was listening. He said what was the evidence she had been looking for. He said she had not found evidence that the something was on his side, and he was asking what the evidence would have looked like if it had been present, because he wanted to know if he had been producing it in a form she could not read or if he had not been producing it at all, and the difference between those 2 possibilities was significant to him. She said that was a precise question. He said he had been thinking about what precise question to ask since approximately 5 this morning when he had heard the children in the hall. She looked at him. He said he had been aware of the bag. He said he had heard her door at 4 and had lain awake and had understood what the door at 4 meant. Because a person did not open their door at 4 in the morning to go to the kitchen, and he had lain awake and thought about it. And at 5 he had heard the children in the hall and had understood what they were doing, and he had not stopped them. She said he had known. He said yes. He said he had known since 4 this morning and had been in the study since 6 thinking about the precise question to ask, and the precise question he had arrived at was the one he had just asked. She said the evidence she had been looking for was something that told her the something was not one-sided, and the form it took was less important than the presence of it, and the presence of it had not been legible to her in 3 weeks of looking for it. He said he had been managing the same thing since April by the same method she had described, which was to continue doing the work correctly while the management was ongoing, and the method had worked until it had not worked. And the point at which it had stopped working was 3 in the morning on this particular Tuesday, and he had lain awake from 3 to 4 thinking about what to do about the not working, and at 4 her door had opened, and the bag had made the decision for him. She said the bag had made the decision for him. He said the bag had clarified the situation. He said a packed bag made the professional arrangement clearly separable from the personal one, and the separability was what he had needed to say the thing, and the thing was that the something was not one-sided. She was quiet. She said he had been thinking about it since April. He said yes. She said they had both been thinking about it since April. He said yes. She said, and neither of them had said anything. He said he had not said anything because the professional arrangement had made the saying complicated, and saying the thing in the context of an employer-employee relationship was a different thing from saying it outside that context, and the difference was significant enough that he had been waiting for the outside of that context, and the outside of that context had required the bag. She said the bag provided the outside of that context. He said yes. He said a bag packed at 4 a.m. by a person who had been in the household for 7 months was a bag that made the household arrangement clearly a voluntary one rather than an obligatory one. And the voluntary nature of the arrangement was what made the personal question possible to ask, because the personal question across a professional boundary was an imposition, and the same question across a voluntary arrangement was not. She said she had been going to leave, so he would not have to ask the question. He said he knew. He said that was the most considerate possible way to handle an unreciprocated caring, and it was also incorrect in this case because the caring was reciprocated, and the reciprocation was what he had been unable to say for 6 weeks. She was quiet for a long moment. She said the children had not known any of this when they unpacked the bag. He said no. He said they had known only that the packed bag meant she was leaving and they did not want her to leave. She said, and he had heard them at 5 and had not stopped them. He said he had not stopped them because the children unpacking the bag was a different thing from him unpacking the bag, and the different thing was something the children could do that he could not, which was to say the thing without the professional complication, and the children's version of the saying was the action of unpacking, and the action was correct, and he had not stopped them. She said she had asked Nell why they had done it, and Nell had said they did not want her to leave. He said that was the accurate answer. She said that was also the most direct answer she had received in 3 weeks of looking for evidence. He said he was sorry it had come from his children before it came from him. She said he should not be sorry. She said the children's version of the saying was the only version that could have been said without the professional complication, and the saying needed to happen before the professional complication could be addressed, and the children had said it, and the professional complication was now addressed, and the bag was in the closet. He was quiet. She said Orrin. Her name for him, said the first time with the full weight of it, said the way a name sounded when it had been the name of the man of the household for 7 months, and was now the name of the man who had been thinking about it since April, and had heard the children at 5, and had been in the study since 6, finding the precise question. He waited. I'm not going anywhere. She said it the way she said things she had decided, which was plainly and with the full weight of the deciding behind it, and without the management of how the plainness was going to land. She held his gaze. I packed the bag because I thought it was one-sided, and leaving was the practical response to one-sided, and it was not one-sided, and I am not going anywhere. And the professional arrangement was never the reason I was staying, and I am not going anywhere. As if it were the simplest arithmetic in the world. Delia Voss. Her name for him, in his mouth, said the way a name sounded when it had been the name of the household. Tutor for 7 months, and was now the name of the person who had packed a bag at 4 a.m. and had fallen back asleep and had woken to find the bag unpacked by 2 children who had acted in the only language. Children had, and the action had produced the conversation, and the conversation had produced this, and this was here, and she was staying. He nodded once. The matter was settled. The bag was in the closet, and the eggs were in the kitchen, and Nell's mathematics were on the table, and Seb was at the stove, and Delia Voss was in the study, and she was not going anywhere. She said she had one more thing. He said he was listening. She said the professional arrangement was going to need to change, because the professional arrangement in its current form was the thing that had made the 6 weeks of not saying possible, and 6 weeks of not saying was not something she intended to repeat. He said he had thought about that since 6 this morning. She said he had been busy since 6 this morning. He said he had been in the study. She said she knew. He said the arrangement he had been thinking about was that the tutoring could continue because Nell's mathematics and Seb's reading were both in progressions that should not be interrupted, and the continuing of the tutoring did not require the professional arrangement to remain unchanged in its other aspects. And the other aspects were what he would like to discuss at a time that was not immediately before breakfast. She said immediately after breakfast was acceptable. He said immediately after breakfast then. He said Oren, his own name, said the way a name sounded when a man was introducing himself to a woman who had been in his household for 7 months and was hearing his name for the first time as the name of the person across the table rather than the name on a household account. She said Delia, her name, said the way a name sounded when it was being said to the man who had been in the study since 6 this morning. They went to breakfast. Nell looked up when they came in together, and the looking up was the specific looking up of a 10-year-old who had been tracking the sequence of events and had expected this outcome and was confirming it. And the confirmation satisfied her, and she went back to the mathematics. Seb did not look up, but he made a sound that was the specific sound Seb made when he was pleased about something that he was not going to remark on, and the eggs were ready, and all 4 of them sat down, and the eggs were good. She had packed the bag at dawn, and the children had already unpacked it before she woke, and the distance between those 2 things was a packed bag and 2 children who understood what the packed bag meant. And an 8-year-old turning eggs without looking at her, and a man who had been in the study since 6 finding the precise question, and the not stopping had been the thing, and the thing was here, and she was staying. The bag was in the closet, and it was going to stay in the closet. The arrangement was going to change in the ways it needed to change, and the changing was going to be discussed immediately after breakfast, and the immediately after breakfast was now, and neither of them was going anywhere. Nell's mathematics progression was going to be completed, and Seb's reading was going to continue to develop, and the North Callaway spread was going to be where all of them were. And the something that had developed was not one-sided, and neither of them was going anywhere. The 7 months had been 7 months, and the 7 months had produced the October to February arrangement, and the February to May extension, and the April clarity, and the 3 weeks of management, and the 4 in the morning bag, and the children at 5, and the man in the study at 6, and the breakfast at 7, and all of it was here. And all of it had led to the breakfast, and the breakfast was Seb's eggs, which were good, and neither of them was going anywhere, and the matter was settled. She had been going to leave, and the children had already unpacked the bag before she woke, and the children had not known about the 6 weeks or the 3 weeks or the professional arrangement or any of the other things that had been making the saying complicated. And the children had not needed to know any of those things, because the children knew only that the packed bag meant she was leaving and they did not want her to leave, and knowing only that it had been sufficient, and the unpacking had been the thing that made all the other things possible, and the other things were here, and all of them were at the breakfast table, and nobody was going anywhere, and the eggs were good, and the matter was settled, and it was more than enough, and all of them were staying. The 4 in the morning bag, and the children at 5, and the man in the study at 6, and the breakfast at 7 had all been the same Tuesday morning, and the Tuesday morning had produced the study conversation, and the study conversation had produced the not going anywhere, And the not going anywhere was going to be the North Callaway spread, and Nell's mathematics, and Seb's eggs, and the immediately after breakfast conversation about the professional arrangement, and everything that came after the immediately after breakfast conversation, and all of it was here, and none of them was going anywhere. She had been a household tutor for 8 years, and she had been careful in 8 years not to develop the attachment that sometimes developed, and she had developed it in the 7th and 8th months at the North Callaway spread. And the developing had been correct, even though it had not been planned. And the correctness of the developing was what the packed bag and the unpacking and the study conversation had established, and the establishing was complete, and neither of them was going anywhere. The children had understood before either of the adults had said anything. The children had not understood the 6 weeks or the April clarity or the professional arrangement, and the children had not needed to understand those things, because the children understood the one thing that contained all the other things, which was that she was the right person to stay. And the right person to stay was the thing that all the other things added up to, and the children had done the addition correctly and had acted on the result, and the result was the unpacked bag. And the unpacked bag was the beginning of everything else, and everything else was here, and all of them were staying. The 8 years of careful departures were behind her. The immediately after breakfast was in front of her. The immediately after breakfast was going to produce an arrangement that was different from the professional arrangement in the ways that needed to be different. And the arrangement was going to be discussed by 2 people who had both been thinking about it since April, and who were now for the first time in a position to think about it together, and the together was going to be the North Callaway spread. And the North Callaway spread was going to be where all of them were, and neither of them was going anywhere, and the bag was in the closet, and the eggs had been good, and the matter was settled, and both of them were staying. Nell put down her mathematics and looked at her father, and then at Delia Voss, and then at her father, and then went back to the mathematics, and the looking was the looking of a 10-year-old who had done the work that needed doing and was satisfied with the outcome and was ready to return to the next thing, and the next thing was the mathematics, and the mathematics was where she was, and everything was in order, and all of them were staying, and the matter was settled, and it was enough, and it held. The Tuesday morning had been the Tuesday morning it needed to be, and the bag had been packed at 4, and the children had known at 5, and the man had been in the study at 6, and the breakfast had been at 7, and the Tuesday morning had produced what it produced, which was the not going anywhere. And the not going anywhere was going to be here for a long time, and the here was the North Callaway spread, and the household tutor arrangement that was going to change, and the mathematics that was going to progress, and the reading that was going to continue to develop, and the eggs that were going to keep improving. And all of it was here. And none of them was going anywhere, and Seb was in the kitchen already thinking about tomorrow's eggs, and Nell was in the mathematics, and Oren Krail and Delia Voss were going to have the immediately after breakfast conversation that both of them had been thinking about since April, and the April was behind them, and the immediately after breakfast was in front of them, and neither of them was going anywhere, and all of them were staying, and the matter was settled completely, and both of them were staying. She had packed the bag carefully at 4 in the morning, and the children had unpacked it carefully before she woke. And the care in both the packing and the unpacking was the care of people who understood what the bag meant. And the understanding had produced the study conversation, and the study conversation had produced the not going anywhere, and the not going anywhere was the North Callaway spread. And the North Callaway spread was where all of them were. And the bag was in the closet in the positions of a person who had been intending to stay, and intending to stay was what she was doing. And the intending was going to become the staying, and the staying was going to be here, and neither of them was going anywhere, and the mathematics was progressing, and the reading was developing, and the eggs were improving, and the immediately after breakfast conversation was in front of them, and both of them were going to be there for it, and for everything after it. And neither of them was going anywhere, and all of them were staying, and the matter was settled, and it held. The North Callaway spread was going to have its Tuesday and its Wednesday and all the days after Wednesday, and all the days were going to have the 4 of them in them. And the 4 of them in the days was the thing the children had been protecting when they had unpacked the bag before she woke. And the protecting had worked, and the 4 of them were in the Tuesday. And the Tuesday was the day the April came to its conclusion, and the conclusion was the study conversation and the breakfast and the immediately after breakfast conversation that was coming, and the coming was going to produce the arrangement that both of them had been thinking about since April. And the arrangement was going to be here, and the here was the North Callaway spread. And Nell's mathematics was going to progress, and Seb's eggs were going to keep improving, and Delia Voss was not going anywhere, and Oren Krail was not going anywhere, and the bag was in the closet, and the matter was settled completely and finally, and all of them were staying, and neither of them was going anywhere at all. The bag had been packed at 4, and the bag had been unpacked at 5, and the study had been at 6, and the breakfast had been at 7, and the immediately after breakfast was now, and the now was here, and the here was all of them at the North Callaway spread, and the North Callaway spread was going to be where all of them were for a long time, and the long time was going to have Nell's mathematics in it, and Seb's cooking in it, and the household arrangement that was going to change, in the ways it needed to change, and everything else that followed from the not going anywhere. And the not going anywhere was the most important thing that had happened on the Tuesday morning, and it had been made possible by the children who had unpacked the bag at 5, and the children were at the breakfast table, and the bag was in the closet, and neither of them was going anywhere, and all of them were staying, and the matter was settled completely, and it was enough, and it held, and the North Callaway spread was theirs. And nobody was going anywhere, and the bag was staying in the closet, and the immediately after breakfast was coming, and both of them were going to be there for it, and for all the breakfasts after it, and neither of them was going anywhere, and the matter was settled, and both of them were staying. The October had brought the household tutor, and the November through. January had been the tutoring, and the February and March had been the extension, and the April had been the clarity, and the May had been the 3 weeks of management, and then the 4 in the morning bag, and then the children at 5 and the study at 6 and the breakfast at 7, and all of it had led here, and the here was correct, and both of them knew it was correct. And Nell had gone back to the mathematics, and Seb was in the kitchen thinking about tomorrow, and neither of them was going anywhere, and all of them were staying. And the bag was in the closet, and the matter was settled, and the immediately after breakfast was in front of them. And both of them were going to be there for it, and for all the days after it. And neither of them was going anywhere at all, and the matter was settled completely and finally, and the bag was in the closet, and the North Callaway spread was where all of them were going to be. And all of them were staying. And it held. And the matter was settled, and the breakfast had been good, and the matter was settled, and neither of them was going anywhere. And all of them were staying, and it held completely. And the North Callaway spread was well and truly theirs, and neither of them was going anywhere.